Hi guys, I did a post a couple of weeks ago on the page asking whether anyone would be interested in hearing about some of my paranormal experiences. I got quite a bit of good feedback, so I thought, I do have a blog where I have in kind of chronological order how it all kind of started for me. But I thought doing it in a video, it's a little bit more personal, you're kind of able to, I suppose it makes it a little bit more real. I think it's very healthy to talk about experiences like this, especially when they're quite profound, quite severe, really frightening experiences, because, spirits, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, entities, can manifest in many different ways, and it can be quite traumatic to the person at the time. And I don't think a lot of people fully understand that, actually. This is a lot of my experiences have lived with me for a very, very long time, and this is definitely one that ranks up there purely for just sheer terror factor. So I guess I will start at the beginning. I will be leaving a link to the blog underneath if anyone's interested. I have had to have a break away from it for a little while, so I'm ready to get back into it again. So I will start from the beginning. Now this is under the post called The Keyboard That Talked. As utterly bizarre as it sounds, I promise. Now, I was 11. I've got a cup of tea, by the way, apologies. I was 11 when this happened. We had moved into a new house on a council estate. It was only about 60, 70 years old. It wasn't like a really old, crumbly, crooked and wonky building. It was just, a council house. It was summer. I think it was about August time, because I was due to go to the secondary school. That would have been my first year at secondary school, come September. Now, I remember my sister was out playing out in the street, because we were kind of on this sort of intersection of the avenue. So it was real busy with kids outside, water balloons, bikes, a lot, so you can imagine it. Now, I, for some reason, had been grounded this day. Now, I cannot recall why I was grounded. It must have been something quite bad, because I'd literally been banished to my bedroom, my little box room, and I didn't have a telly in there. So I think trying to entertain myself got a bit tedious. I started drawing, doodling. I remember dicking around with nail polish. And then I remember my mum and dad were arguing downstairs. My sister was out playing, and mum and dad were out downstairs kind of really going for it. There'd been a lot of tension that day. I think just to kind of drown out the noise a little bit. And I had this idea. I thought, right, go get my sister's keyboard out of her room, have a little tinkle around with it. I was getting more interested in music at that point. So, this wasn't a fancy Yamaha keyboard or anything like that. It was just like a kiddie's one, but quite a big one. But it has some interesting features, like loads of sound effects. You could, you could press record. So I went and got that down out of her wardrobe, and I plonked myself on my bedroom floor and started mucking around with it, I guess, just trying to kind of find a tune I liked, something that I was, I suppose, pleased with. And when I finally settled on something, I pressed the record button, because I thought, I'll tell you what, when my sister comes back, I'll show her later and teach her how to play it. Now, as soon as I pressed the record button, all the sound effects came on at once, every single one, looping over each other, which immediately it was quite a horrifying sound, to put it mildly, because they were just looping over and over and over. It did kind of startle me a little bit, but I just sort of thought, okay, maybe the batteries are running out. I don't think they've been changed for a little while. And then the sound effects quietened down. You could still hear them, but they dim right down. And they were just like this real quiet, low, I suppose, backtrack to what was about to happen next. This voice came out of this keyboard. Now, I could not recreate this voice as much as I tried. My throat would be red raw if I tried, but it was hoarse, it was gruff, it was a really raw, primal male voice. When you hear these really demonic, quite disturbing voices, it was like that. And it shouted my name, and it shouted it again and again, and it got louder and louder, and it got quicker and quicker. And I think at first I just kind of blanked out a bit. I was like, okay, this isn't happening. And then I freaked the F out. I mean, full-blown freaked. And I remember screaming, and I literally just kind of shoved it away from me across the carpet. And it was still, I mean, this thing was literally screaming my name. I mean, shouting it, bellowing it as loud as you can imagine, over and over. And I mean, I was screaming blue murder at this point. I remember turning the off button. I was pushing it like mad. I just wanted this thing to shut up at this point. It wasn't turning off. It was not turning off for shit. Now, my mum and stepdad, who had been downstairs arguing, had clearly heard this, what sounded like a very gruff male voice coming from upstairs. I assume they must have thought some guy had somehow got into the house. Obviously heard me screaming, you know, terror. Now, my dad was a pretty stoic kind of guy, you know. He wasn't one for believing in things like this. He's pretty sceptical even to this day. He'll even say to this day, that's the one thing he'll never be able to explain. And I always remember the look on his face when he burst through the door and clocked where this voice was coming from. He literally just, I mean, but I'm amazed he didn't take the door off the hinges. He literally flew through the door, my mum behind him. And he looked at this keyboard where this voice was coming from, and his eyes bulged. I remember that so vividly, his eyes bulged. And he just kind of like stopped for a minute. This thing literally just kind of like bellowing my name. And I think, I don't know if it is a father thing or a man thing, but he didn't know how to react. And he literally, I mean, I'm kind of looking at him like, please help me. Like, I don't know what to do. And he literally just picked up this keyboard and smashed it full pelt into the floor. I think that was the only way he knew how to deal with it, was to literally purely just destroy the source of where this was coming from. Now, I mean, he smashed his thing so hard that the backing, everything, the batteries flew out and the backing fell off. I mean, it was a mess by this point. The voice didn't stop immediately, interestingly. It continued for probably a good 6-7 seconds afterwards. I think by the time it stopped, I mean, we were all just kind of like looking at each other in complete disbelief. And I know my mum was over my dad's shoulder, like pulling his face as if to say, like, sorry, what the hell just happened here? Dad didn't really say anything. I don't think he knew how to deal with it. And he literally just picked this thing up, right, in his arms. And if I remember, he took it downstairs and he dumped it in one of the bins out the back, outside near the sheds. And that was it. You know, now, my screaming at this point was so loud that we actually had neighbours and some of the kids and like my sister and that gathering around the front gate outside the house because my screaming had been like pretty hysterical. Within a few days, obviously, I mean, I was, you know, 11, I was going out with my friends down the avenue, and a couple of them had asked me, you know, what the hell happened the other day? What was the screaming? Obviously, I told them. I told them, which I think something as profound as that, you want to open up about it because it's, you know, it's almost unbelievable. And obviously, they mercilessly, you know, all your keyboard talk to you. You need help, you know what I mean? Like, and that, from that point, I shut down. I completely shut down when it comes to a lot of the paranormal stuff. I mean, I had some friends you could open up to. I mean, they experienced it themselves, many of them did. But yeah, that was by far, I mean, we had a few experiences. Only leading up to this, there's only a couple of things which happened. Like I say, we'd only been there a few months, and a couple of things happened which were definitely what I would deem as being very strange. And I think were probably the precursor, kind of setting the stage for what was going to come for the next, you know, 8, 9, 10 years, however long we were there. I think it was 9 years. And yeah, I mean, I'd always been fascinated in the paranormal. And aside from them strange things, there'd never been anything like in your face to say, right, yeah, okay. But that was my introduction to spirit. And to this day, I do not like to hear them talk, and it may sound so cruel. Most of them know that. They know I don't like to hear them talk. But yeah, like, I wish I could recreate that voice for you, but honestly, I would not be able to do it. But it was horrific. And I will never forget that till the day I die. I have tried to find a few other accounts of people where they've had, I suppose, electrical battery devices that have done it. And there was an interesting account. I was working with a guy who worked doing a paranormal podcast, and he had only ever found one other kind of account where essentially it was someone's record player did something very, very similar, because he brought it up to me. He said, it's only the second account I've heard of it. He said, but it was a record player. It was the same deep, dark voice kind of coming out of it. And I've just found it, I mean, terrifying as it was, I found it utterly fascinating as the years have gone on, how they can manipulate something quite basic, essentially, a keyboard, a battery-powered keyboard. But I still don't know to this day who that was shouting me. I don't think I'll ever know who that was. Somebody blatantly wanted my attention in a pretty, you know, terrifying way. But yeah, so that's my story about the keyboard that talked, and that was my first truly scary paranormal experience. And it just kind of went downhill from there. So, not to be mean, but, you know, it was scary living in that house, very scary. So I hope, I don't know if you'll be able to take anything from that, or if you have any questions, by all means leave them in the comments, I'll try and answer. So yeah, spirits be doing weird things, that's all I can say. So I'm going to say goodnight and sign off, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my cup of tea because it's nearly cold. And if you like this, I'm sure, because I have lots of experiences over the years, quite bizarre, and I'll be happy to share them with you some more if you want that, of course. So I'll say goodnight because it's late here. Okay, so good night.